Hey guys, welcome back to the Seasonal Movement Podcast. I'm your host, Ruben, your seasonal expert. And today we are for a treat. We got Amber Parks. She is a veterinarian turned burnout and stress coach who helps overwhelmed and burnt out people reclaim their energy, time, and confidence without needing to quit their jobs or change careers. I have gone through that and I did it twice in my life where I had to take big breaks. So I'm extremely curious to see what are the ways that we can do it without taking a break. And I also am very, very, very happy to bring in my perspective about how the seasons create this in a way, or how we can use the seasons to get away from it. So after she experienced burnout herself, she now helps clients break the cycle through virtual one on one coaching. Her podcast, Stop the Burnout, which, by the way, we're going to have it on the link on the description down below, and self guided programs created for people with limited time. So, we also have all those handles in the description. You also might want to know that she loves helping people rediscover joy and fulfillment. I'm very happy about that, both at work and beyond, by creating true life work balance. I want to dive in that. Some people say that doesn't exist. So I want to touch on that and quieting that tiny voice in their head so that they can take back control of their lives. I also want to touch on that. I like to look into subconscious and the conversation we always have going on in our heads. So help me welcome Amber. Hi, Amber. How are you today?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm glad to be here.
And just for everybody to know, I think you are in North or South Carolina. Is that right?
I'm in Florida. Close.
Florida, my bad. Yeah, even farther. Yeah, I know that you moved from the Midwest, so I'm also very interested in getting your perspective on that. As it's backwards for me. I moved from Venezuela into the Midwest, and I know that the seasons have something to do with that. Not perhaps the seasons, but perhaps the winter. Can you tell me a little bit of that so that we can warm up the audience? And what is your perspective about moving from the Midwest into Florida?
Yeah. So I grew up in Massachusetts, so a little bit further, kind of the Northeast, but with that, we experienced obviously very seasonal seasons, if you will. We have a
Yeah,
very distinct fall and
yeah,
spring and winter and summer. And growing up there, you just think that's normal, and I remember it getting dark at like 4 p.m. and in the as the seasons were changing it in the winter. And then on top of that, there's many times like there's snow and there's like you're not leaving your house. So it really affects you a lot. When I moved south, I went to vet school in Alabama and then moved to Florida. I was like, oh my God, it's warmer more year round. But even just the daylight aspect was huge and less of the big seasonal change here. But I can see how it still affects myself, and the energy that I have to show up for the day. I think that's the biggest piece.
I find that interesting. You mentioned the lighting pattern, like you didn't expect that. Like we think about seasons and winter about snow or cold. But in reality, I have come to believe, and based on studies in our circadian rhythms, that lighting is the biggest shift. Lighting is the one that affects us the most. So, interesting now looking back, you can acknowledge that, but I'm pretty sure, like many of us, I was completely ignorant, even like 3, 4 years into it, that there was such a dramatic shift. So, I think that anybody hearing this can be served by just paying attention to that.
Yeah.
And the other very interesting thing you mentioned is that as you were moving, you experience a 4 p.m. sunset in the winter. I am experiencing about a 4:30. And what is interesting is that even though you don't see that dramatic shift anymore, like you are aware that there is still something in there that affects you. And I find that all across the border. So I have talked to people that live in Florida and experience very dramatic and drastic seasonal moods, ups and downs. And what I have noticed is that the lighting changes quite a bit, but the cloud coverage, I believe, is the one that changes the most. So even though it's not as cold, still people don't go to the beach as much, perhaps because of the wind and the cloud coverage. And that is a big effect into our mood. And the matter of the fact is that even in the fall, in the early fall, most people experience a go down on their energy and their mood because of cloud coverage. It's still not that cold, but it's a little rainy here and there. And after 2 days of that, people is already expressing themselves. As we're talking, is early fall. This will be released at a different date, but this has been a very warm season, very bright, relatively abnormal. And now as people is starting to come out and say, hey, depression is out there, anxiety, people is starting to come out. So I find interesting that even in Florida, you're able to acknowledge that. In a way, I want to relate it a little bit with burnout. So burnout being the main subject, we're going to be kind of bouncing back and forward with the seasons. Is that my question to you? Have you noticed, or looking back, or even right now, that relation? Like there's a little bit of a relation between the seasons and burnout.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, just that opportunity, if you will, for more like depression and anxiety when you are already so fragile is not the best term, but when you're vulnerable because you're already burnt out or on your way to burnout, and then we get the seasonal change with that, it just amplifies what you're already experiencing. And that's what I have seen for myself. And I also think we forget that it is a different season. And so, just like burnout happens because we're just going 100 miles an hour constantly. There's never the ebbs and flows. Like with the season, we would have the ebbs and the flows. And we just try and keep it, pedal to the metal, just going 100 and like not having that opportunity for things to change and to have a little bit different dynamic. I think that's where I see it the most.
I agree. I have a personal story with burnout, and I want to put it out there. If there is any coincidence, anybody hearing and they see reflecting this, it's just pure coincidence. But the reality is, I believe it's universal. So I'm an entrepreneur. I got started in real estate. I'm very driven. I'm a first generation immigrant, and making a name for myself, building a legacy. And at the early on, the season started affecting me by me don't even knowing what was happening. So what I started to experience was like this desire of doing more, achieving more, building a legacy. It's not just that I'm trying to make ends meet. I'm not trying to make my monthly income. I'm trying to make way above that so I can invest it. And I noticed now, looking, not right now, but maybe about 7 years ago, when I started looking back and realizing what was happening, is exactly what you're saying, that there's an actual rhythm to life because the environment has a rhythm. There is an actual pattern that we can predict. But I believe that there is a little bit of a misconception and a lie out there for high achievers. It's like, go, go, go. You can do this. Mindset is everything. Motivation. And we don't take the time to literally, it might just take a minute a day to look around and say, is there something different out there? Do I feel a little different? Is people acting out a little different? Do I need to adjust my approach a little bit? It's just like, we think it's like life is linear and it's in an upward trend and it just never stops. But what I experienced with burnout is that you cannot experience that. The line gets a little flatter, but eventually it just tanks. And then I have to find myself starting all over again in a way.
Yeah, that's a good point because even for like just entrepreneurs in general, we forget their seasons of business too. Like as much as
Mm.
we would want it to be linear, maybe in the long run it's linear, but there's dips and there's
Hmm.
plateaus. And so um, the longer that you're probably an entrepreneur, the easier it is to kind of absorb those changes. But if you're not familiar with that or expecting that, and you're not overachiever, high
Yeah.
achiever, you're gonna panic a little bit. And
Oh yeah.
it's that compound effect. So like slow, steady, consistent action will get you further in the long run always. And that doesn't, but that includes breaks, right? Like we take a break, we rest, and things go forward. But like you were saying, we're just like trying to, fly up and continue to grow, but there's no room for rest. And so it's not a question of if, it's a question of when we will burn out if we're approaching it with that mindset.
I agree. I am going to touch on breaks later on. I make a note because that's extremely important. But I want to put my story out there, and you just nail it on the coffin because you're saying if you're young, if you are, we can use the word inexperienced or like a startup or somebody that is starting their journey, their professional career. It doesn't just happen as an entrepreneur. It also happens as climbing the corporate ladder or as achieving goals, personal goals to you in your family and in your health. It happens in all different areas, but I think that the entrepreneurial journey is kind of relevant right now. Like there's so much content about it, and I see myself there. So it's just me being able to talk to somebody 5 years ago is a lot easier. So I want to say that I experienced just exactly that. And if you are going through that, it really helps to bring perspective, to see people that have gone through it and can look back and say, listen, there are ebb and flows. And with that, I want to bust the myth that, hey, in the winter you don't do anything, or in the slow season you don't do anything, because the slow season for people in Phoenix, Arizona, in real estate is in the summer because it's so hot. Like it's like the
Sure.
winter of Arizona, Phoenix. But where I live as a real estate investor, the slow season starts about right now when the kids just go back to school, the market slows down a little bit. And then as we go into the holiday season and football season, literally combined with the weather, combined with the lack of energy that people have, like it's a natural universal desire for all of us to just slow down a little bit. So then people become a little more selective of where they focus their attention, and bigger projects are taken. And as a business owner, I will freak out every fall and winter, and I will completely redo parts of my business because I was thinking that I'm not doing something right. And I was also thinking, this is super interesting because I was thinking, people is resting right now. I'm not going to. I'm gonna go and do the work, and I'm gonna get more results. I'm gonna take advantage of this. And it's funny because I see all these older investor entrepreneurs. Some of the realtors just take 3, 4 months of the year, and I would look down on that. I'll be like, no,
Yeah.
like I'm smarter than them. I'm gonna put the work. And I now looking back, it got to a point that was about 6 years ago that I realized, wow, this is just a waste of time.
Yeah, yeah. You know what's really interesting in that? That's actually, I think it's stage 5. That's a specific stage in burnout of when, because I had the same thing, when we look at other people that aren't measuring up in our mind, like they're not going at the level that we are going at, and we almost look down on them. That
Mm.
like, what did you just you like you don't hustle? Because I looked at a lot of people as coworkers and like, why are you not showing up early, staying late, and now I'm completely 180. But that, when I learned about the actual stages, you can Google it too. It's a specific stage of burnout. And I was like, oh my, I went through every single one of those. So it's funny you say that.
Wow, so there is stages of burnout. I am not too aware of all the stages, but perhaps we will continue to discover them as we continue to talk. Every time you see one, just bring it up. Because we just discovered stage 5, guys. And I imagine how many stages there are?
There's 12. There's a
12
lot.
stages. So it's not early, but it's still, early on, as we progress. I'm curious to know, as we keep progressing, what those stages look like. But I remember during that time, I wasn't really feeling the burnout yet. Like I was very
Right.
motivated.
Yep.
If anything, I was just ignorant, but I was still driven, and I was still, like kind of taking the challenge and going for it. That was my attitude at the time. But looking back, perhaps 2 years after that, I realized like, wow, like this seasonal thing actually, and it was a progression of me understanding the seasons. I think what is super interesting is if we feel something, if you feel something enough, if I feel something, most likely everybody else around us also feels it. Like there's a certain degree, it might be a little more, a little less. So it's kind of getting in tune and knowing ourselves, and then also understand that we are perhaps not that unique. Like there's uniqueness to our bodies, to our rhythms, to our body types. There's a ton of uniqueness to that, but it's kind of hard to escape those cycles, those general universal feelings that the environment bring to us. So my question to you is, have you identified with some of your clients that there is a seasonality through their ups and downs, and perhaps you get like a lot of calls during a specific, and it's not like one day of the year, or maybe it is, or maybe it's like during this month is when I get the busiest because everybody, or I get more new clients during this time, or people that you have worked with for a long period of time, you see how they somehow decline a little bit during this time and they need more help. Have you noticed some patterns out there?
Yeah, I would say this time of year, so October to December, is I think you're exactly right. Like the kids go back to school, everyone gets into more of a routine. And so it's almost like the time for doing something about a problem, because most likely many of us who get burnt out, we know that we're like really suffering and struggling, but we don't have time for that. We're going to put that on the back burner, you know? And so the end of the year, I think stuff's starting to wrap up and people are like, okay, now's the time to, I want to make a change, or like many things, the beginning of the year. So January, February, people are, New Year's resolution, we're starting a new year. And I tend to see a little increase during that time because I think just that awareness is there. And to your point, I totally agree that people in our environment, we don't recognize how much we absorb a lot of what's going on and a lot of
Mhm.
similarities. And I think a lot of that comes from, we all have like our intuition, but we're also, especially with that hustle culture, if you will, programmed to not listen to that and to push
Mhm.
it by the wayside. And
Yeah.
so, when you come out of burnout or healing from burnout, you have to, one, even recognize what that is, your intuition, and then be comfortable trusting it too. So I definitely have seen that as well.
I agree. I just made a note too. I wanna just bring it up right now because I realize we've been talking about burnout for 15 minutes. And what is the definition of burnout, so that we can be very clear and bring some basis, like what does burnout even means?
Yeah. So burnout is a chronic stress where no amount of like sleeping, breaks, vacation, days off cure. And there's those 12 stages that I talked about, but burnout is something where, I hear from a lot of people, and I experience this too, where you kind of gaslight yourself into like, I just got to make it to this vacation, my vacation in 2 weeks, if you're lucky enough to take a vacation, or there's a long weekend, I'll just make it to that. And then you get to the long weekend, you spend half of it sleeping, trying to recuperate. And then the other half, you're running around trying to do stuff. And then at the end, you're dreading going back to maybe work or your business. And so that break was nothing to help with that. You're just still like in that smoldering burnout is what I call
Mhm.
it.
So I look into burnout quite a bit, and the best definition I have come to agree with, perhaps, or to like identify, is that it's both a psychological and a biological response to a level of activity. So we often think that it's psychological, but there's an actual biological effect happening within your body. And as I dove into the seasons and neuroscience, I wasn't looking specifically to this, but now I realize that I define it as a biochemical imbalance that was whole for too long. So there is a parasympathetic system and there's the sympathetic system. This is just one way to explain it that I really kind of I rely on. And is that when you are on stress and alert, and it might be because you are going to get this project done, you want to save money, invest money, or you have a boss that really drives you hard, or you are on this constant activity and even worry about life. It's not about even achieving. It's just like you get on this fear state, and
Yeah.
anything that kind of happens is like an alert in your brain that something's going to go wrong. Perhaps it's financially you're struggling, and anything that kind of happens triggers you because you don't have that much savings. The list just goes on and on and on. But when we spend so much time on that stress side of our system, we don't take breaks to allow ourselves to kind of recover. So it's like in your brain you're producing cortisol, which is a stress hormone, or perhaps you're producing serotonin a lot, which is like, you achieve something and you feel the satisfaction. And then dopamine, maybe you are just dopamine driven. That is my biological profile. I'm dopamine driven, and if I don't have checks on myself, I will just go go go, because and then when I touch it, when I grab it, okay, I'm done. But I can go forever. So that when you are on that system and you are neglecting perhaps your melatonin states, like when you are relaxed or resting, it's just kind of like there are some neurochemicals that happen when we're resting. Even when we see people that we love, like when we experience like oxytocin, or when we care for others and take the time to appreciate that, it might be prolactin. So it's like we just completely go on board on a ton of neurochemicals, ignore the rest, and over time, there is a big one here that I learned before. It's like adrenal fatigue also happens, or adrenals completely just like shut down after so much production. And more importantly, it's like before they shut down, they just never really turn off. So they can be shut down. Like they're used to being on edge. And then to shut it down, like you mentioned, like that weekend, oh, the long weekend, that's not enough.
Right.
That's why when I took my breaks, I took 6 month breaks, because you literally have to take the time to somehow flip the script.
Yeah. Yeah, that so to that point too, I adrenal fatigue here, present, have it. It's still trying to recover from it, even from years before. But also what happens with all those biochemical changes is we also get so much more susceptible to disease, which I think we're
Mm-hmm.
aware of and we're getting more research on it. But there was a study done, and I think in women that the rate of autoimmune diseases was like tenfold of what it was for men. For women that were like people pleasers, or I forget how they worded it specifically, but I was like shocked, but not, but 10 like that, those emotions don't go anywhere. That stress doesn't go anywhere. It manifests as those biochemical changes. So I think we forget that too, but it can affect you long after the burnout might be healed.
Now, what is important to recognize is that before we get to stage five, there is stage one. So I think that we can bring a lot of value and awareness. And part of what I do is creating that avoidance or starting on step one and two.
Yeah.
And the conversation came up early about breaks. So I make a note because I want to talk about that. It's like how beneficial are breaks.
Yeah. So they are beneficial. It's twofold for me. So breaks are beneficial just for like the actual rest and brain, rest. But what I have found, and I've done this myself, is that sometimes rest is like, oh, I'll just relax and I'm watching TV, but I'm folding laundry or I'm doing the, like it's not true rest. And sometimes though, our nervous system isn't comfortable with rest. And so I find that a lot with my clients, that I've had one client, she's like, I am uncomfortable to slow down
Mm-hmm.
because we've always equated our self-worth with productivity. So that's what the driver is. And that's why, like you said, a weekend off, you're still going to go back to work or whatever you have to do on that Monday. You're still the same person trying to process stress in the same way. So it's just a slight break in the chaos. But true rest and feeling comfortable to rest is just as important.
I apply within my framework, and it is kind of like the last thing that I bring into the equation, because there is so many basic things that have to be done properly, or those breaks are not meaningful. Like you said, like if you are not comfortable getting to that point, there is nothing really is going to help you if you have a 15-minute break in your calendar,
Right.
because get what you're going to do. You're going to be scrolling, you're going to be sending a DM, you're going to be, I don't know, like you're going to be doing something because we're not comfortable doing that. So I like to always just look at, hey, let's improve sleep. Like sleep is one of those that can benefit the rest that you do. If you don't have good sleep and you do everything right, you're still gonna be in that stress flight, or you're not gonna be rested. You're not gonna be able to have autophagy at night. You're not gonna be able to replenish your body and your brain. So when it comes down to breaks, I just want to make a point that they're part of the equation, like absolutely. But number two is you need to know how to do them, and you need to know what to do in those breaks. It's not about like doing, but the reason that we actually mention that is because that's probably what you're used to doing, like doing, going. So it's like, hey, let's look at this from a different angle. It's not about adding something more to do, but again, in combination with good habits in other parts of your life, in combination with understanding the seasonality that you are into at the moment, then those breaks can be extremely powerful. So, what I want to do now is just dive into some tips. How those breaks look like, how long they are, how frequent. What do we do in those breaks? I want to really go there because they are extremely beneficial.
Yeah. So you brought up a good point of like self-care. We hear a lot about self-care is what you need for burnout. And I caution people because I'm like, that is just, like you said, one more thing on your to-do list.
Hmm.
Now, I can be running around all day, and if I go for a walk or I take a bubble bath or I get a massage, that's great. But again, it can add almost more stress because if we feel like, oh, we didn't do that thing it's supposed to help with the stress, now we're stressed because we're overachievers. So what I like to do with my clients is to, find out what their norm is. What is your normal routine? What does your day look like? And we find little pockets of time. And it really starts with 5 or 10 minutes because, like we said, it's sometimes so jarring to our nervous system. And then as time goes on, we increase the length of that and what it looks like. But it's hard without a phone, right? Like sitting, maybe set a timer, 5, 10 minutes, sit in a quiet room. This is really challenging for a lot of people with no phone. And as you do it more, it becomes easier. You don't have to necessarily meditate, but just sit there and like stop and just, look at your surroundings. Those are, if that can do it, going for a walk is helpful, but not having your phone, not having that sensory input is what I think is hugely important too.
So what you mentioned, I want to add to it. Like, I want to keep going deep in there. There is a order of things, and like you mentioned, figuring out your day, understanding when you can find packets. Like that's why I like to start with sleep. Sleep takes so much time out of our day, so let's do it right. And
Yeah,
also like a pre-bed routine. Like let's do that right. So when you sleep right, and then in the morning, what is that you're doing? Some people just wake up on their phone, like emails, and I'm guilty.
right.
I did it today because I had a big deal happening, but I don't do it too often. I'm just gonna put it out there, but it happens. But when you are used to, when you're hooked, when you become an addict to that
Yeah,
behavior, if you are listening this and you think that's you, no big deal. Just realize that you have created a pattern in your life that can be broken. That's about it.
yep,
But that pattern is creating stress in your life.
right.
Yeah. So after we do that and we look at other areas of life and we figure out the day, what I like to do is look into our natural rhythm. So I'm big into obviously our circadian rhythm. That's what I do has so much to do with that. That's our 24-hour clock that changes with the seasons because it's all signaled by the lighting and by the environment, the temperature. Now, there is another rhythm that I say it's not like it's new by any means, but it's kind of started trending a little bit ago, and people don't really even acknowledge it as much. They call it the flow. So a lot of people, it's like the flow, the science of the flow, and I coach flow, and it's like that is based on ultradian rhythm principles. So we have this other natural rhythm within our body, that follows 120 to 90 minutes. Like everybody's just slightly different, but we all have these guys. It's like 120 minutes where you go in a cycle, like you go up, let's say it's minute zero, and you start picking back up. And you go up and you go up, maybe it's like minute 60, and then you start going down. So that is our attention or energy or focus or ability to get things done in a good way. Like when we are up there, we want to ride the wave.
Right.
We wanna do the things. We don't want any distractions. That's a lot of what flows really means. It's like remove those distractions when you are in that peak state. But what I like to do is recognizing that hey, those down states are not bad. Like they're actually the
Right.
greatest time to introduce those resting periods. So I call them breaks. And if you map out your day, which is kind of what I do on my framework, you will end up with a mid morning break, a midday break. Some people call it lunch break, but I believe it's more than that. And then a mid afternoon break. And it's just because it follows that ultradian rhythm sequence. Now, somebody might have that at 11, at 12, at 1. Everybody's slightly different. You have to learn your own rhythm. You have to become comfortable understanding yourself. And it also requires of perhaps being a little flexible because we might have job schedules and so on. But the reality is that if you end up with 3 breaks throughout your day, I want to get your input here. And maybe you can also expand on how many breaks do you recommend and at what time. Um, what do we do in those breaks? I have a very, I have my own perspective and I want to share it after you. I want to learn from you, like how many breaks we have in a day and what is that we're doing throughout those breaks.
Yeah. So I think part of that is everyone is, you mentioned circadian rhythm, everyone is a little bit different, but almost doing I like to have my clients do an energy audit. And we kind of find the time of day that you feel the most energized and the time that you feel the least energized. And so we kind of take that into consideration. And I think I do think, regardless of what you're doing, whether you're sitting in an office, whether you're out on the road, like having that mid-morning break, midday break, mid-afternoon, just for our concentration in general is adequate. I know I will say, speaking from experience, if you're in a place where you can't take a break, like I worked ER, and so many times I would be the only doctor, and number one, I worked a lot of overnight, so that's not great for for your circadian rhythm.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
it's real bad.
We'll
And
go there in a minute.
yeah, part of the adrenal fatigue. But I would go to the bathroom for 5 minutes. Like I couldn't leave the building, but I just had to get away from the sounds and, the phone and everything's beeping and making noise and just have that solid 5 minutes because I knew no one would interrupt me. So if you have to almost make time for that, and get creative.
I want to touch on the overnight shift, and we all are adults. We do what we gotta do, and society needs that. So no
Sure.
big deal. But I want to also add to the disease factor that you mentioned earlier when it relates to being overwhelmed, being burnt out, being constantly on. Also, not respecting our ultradian rhythm or natural ultradian rhythm also leads towards disease. So it's not about like, hey, we're here to tell you a bunch of things to do. It's like it has been proven by science that when you do these things, you live better. So I like to say we achieve more with less effort because we are in alignment with our environment and our own biology. And the way that I do that is like you're talking about assessments. It's like, okay, assess your environment, assess your lighting. That is like the first step I do through my framework. And then very shortly after, we also assess the biology of the individual. So understanding the individual, like you say, like there is some chronologically late owl people. By chronobiology, I mean like your genes are designed so that your energy peaks later compared to a person that is an early riser. And
Right.
when we say early or late, there's not really a time on the clock. There's so many variables, but it just means that you're like on the later group, perhaps. And like I'm one of those that wake up ready to go. So I don't want to waste that because by 4, 3 o'clock, I start to peak down. So that also depends of the season. And this is what I found that is so interesting is that my routine in the winter is different than in the summer. because of my energy levels vary with it. So when it's summertime and we experience a day and a half of daylight compared to the winter, meaning, we get like 14 hours of daylight or yeah, I think that's what it is where I am. I got to look back into my sheet. Compared to in the winter, we get like 9 hours of daylight at one point. And it's like, I do feel the difference. It's not that I sleep more, it's like I sleep earlier in the
Hmm.
winter than in the summer. So my schedule modifies because of that, because of my biological response to the environment, so I can produce when I'm at my best, and so that I can rest when I'm at my worst. And it's not good or bad, it's just at my low, let's put it that way.
Right.
Even the fact that I say worst shows the epidemic of mindset of go
Yeah.
getter that we experience, because there's no bad or wrong, it's just high or low. Is that we're the
Yes.
ones
Yeah.
putting meaning to it?
Yes. Yeah. Well, and enough another point too that I was just came to my mind thinking about this is because all those things are external in a way, but they're not going to change, right? Like if you, uh, I guess my point is people that are stressed and burned out, our first thought is let's change my job. Let's change the external
Yeah,
environment.
no,
And it's, yeah, because all those things that you just mentioned are still the same. And we're still just trying to process in the same way. And what is even trickier is some people will do that and they'll get a new job, which I did. And you do feel better for a short period of time because everything's new. It's like having a new car, right? Like
correct.
it's fun to
Yeah,
drive and you're like, oh, this is great. And then
yeah.
it just becomes your car. So it's important to know that if you're not changing the things that you mention or being at least aware of them, then we're just changing external environment without, changing how we process that.
I have so many stories about that, so just gonna be extremely short on it. It's like when I showed up to the Midwest, I had no idea what I was doing. The issue of like going and getting and doing things and
Yeah,
not really understanding my biology or the environment. But it was fine for like 2 to 3 years. Why? Because it was new, it was exciting.
right.
And then to your point, if I change a job but I didn't address my behaviors, and I think more than behaviors is or awareness. Is if I do not become aware, I'm most likely going to continue to do the same things that got me in the same hole, but it's going to have a different name, but it's still going to be a hole. It might be deeper even because I never gave myself the time to regenerate. It's like we go even deeper every time that we are not aware of what we're doing and we're doing it incorrectly, because the society that we live in will drive us towards that. It won't really drive
Right.
us towards like, oh, rest, rest, rest. You don't hear
Right.
that message anywhere. You just hear the motivation. You can do it. Excuses are, just go ahead and get it done. That is the message out there. So we're naturally going to be gravitating towards it. So I want to go back to the breaks, and I just want to bring in a little bit of the seasonality to the conversation, which is that if I know that my winters are generally lower, what I like to take on those breaks is like number one, if I'm gonna have 3 breaks throughout the day, usually one of them is gonna be to recover. And my summer recovery break is actually the middle of the afternoon. And because I acknowledge that the day is so long that if I take that break in the afternoon, like at 2, 3 p.m., and I take a quick nap, like 20 minutes, and I do a little yoga and I breathe to relax myself, like that is the meaning of that break, is so I can split the day in half so that the second half I'm 100% again, instead of like running through the whole day and by the time I hit 3 p.m. I'm like 60%. And as I continue to go, I'm not the best version of myself.
Yes.
But the inverse can happen in the winter. Like in the winter, I'm too low. I actually bring breaks that will increase my energy. Because I do believe that winter is not about doing nothing. Winter is about perhaps bringing yourself up a little bit, but not that much where you start kind of hitting the threshold of burnout if you continue that throughout the whole year. So it's like you change your activities a little bit, you're still going and you're in alignment, but you increase that output just a little bit from the natural tendency of wanting to stay in your couch, perhaps. So in the winter, I wake up at 5 in the morning, I go to work out. That's something I don't do in the summer because I go to sleep later. And in the summer, I wake up later, so I work out in the afternoon.
Hmm.
So what I really want to bring to the point here is that those breaks should change slightly through your seasons. You should have like a set of breaks that work well, a routine that works well for the winter, and one that works well for the summer. So that's my
Yeah.
2 ounces on that.
Yeah, and I think allowing ourselves to know that there is a seasonality to it and it is normal. I find a lot of us have that all or nothing mindset. So that's why that's why we do well. We
Yes.
go, go, go. But anything that is different, or a change can sometimes we look at it as like, oh, that's scary, when to your point, it's really part of the change in season and it's only going to help you.
So I saw a post today, somebody within an entrepreneurial group. It's all about real estate, and I got tagged on it because a friend's like, "Hey, he can help with that," and it's happening constantly right now. Everybody's putting out there in different groups or in their own wall, like seasonal depression is real, or oh, I hate this weather, or man, I'm
Mm,
tired, I just want to sleep all day, or like it's happening everywhere right now. And what I find interesting is that, like you mentioned earlier, so you mentioned this earlier about winter rest when it relates to us or self worth is perceived negatively. Compare that to the summer hype. So now, being a burnout expert, you can also say, wow, like that is also pretty bad when you are on a hypomania trend. I experience that. I will go hypomaniatic. And what that is just simply a very mild degree of literally honest. It's like bipolar disorder. It's like it's mania, but smaller. It's just like we are on an overdrive. And again, it's cortisol, serotonin, dopamine. You are eating less. You might be smoking, drinking. Like you are just constantly being sensory overwhelmed. And when you mentioned the breaks, I wanted to touch that. Basically, what you're doing is you are limiting your sensory environment to calm yourself down, right?
mhm.
So in the summer, that becomes very important. And I want to bring that something in the future here as we continue to develop this. But I wanted to get your opinion on hypomania and how, we're kind of like, that's not part of the equation. Like nobody talks about that. Everybody talks about the winter blues. But for one to exist, the other one has to exist as well. So what is your opinion on that?
Yeah, it is something where we have to realize that, like you said, there's balance. You're going to have one extreme or the other. But with that, we have to look at the intention of that too, which I think is always important. So if sometimes I'll tell my clients, like if there's a short period of time and you are trying to get to a deadline or whatever, and you're really pushing, that's one thing. But if you are always after a deadline, that's the problem. We just about get to the finish line and then we move the finish line and we just, keep going. And so I think
Mhm.
the biggest thing is there ebbs and flows, or is there at least an end to that? Because, yeah, our society rewards that over, like, that's early bird gets the worm, and that's how you're going to grow in your profession, and that's what I thought. So I
Mhm.
overextended myself, but in short spurts. It's just like stress, right? Like stress isn't terrible in short spurts. That's what it's there for. That's
Yeah,
what that
yeah.
cortisol is.
It
But
serves you.
it's right, right. It's that sustained, like we're going on weeks and months and years of that is not healthy. So I think it's all about balance.
I agree. And again, the message is dual here because by bringing that down doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that in a healthy amount is the right way to go about it. So I want to bring my own story to the equation, which is that I have this glue in my forehead. Every time the subject comes up, the same image comes to me. And it's like I'm in one of my rental properties doing landscape, and it's 9 p.m. and it's summertime, and the next day I wake up and I go and do the same, and that movie just keeps repeating itself, like I'm working from sunrise to sunset. And through that process I'm perhaps only eating lunch, and that's about it. And that was me for a season, for a year, for actually longer. It was me for like 3 years. And that is exactly what you're describing. It's like there's not a little bit of an ebb and flow. I also want to say that there are times where you want to take advantage and you want to go for it and you want to do the work and you want to build a legacy. Go for it. An opportunity showed up, business is going well, you have to get to business to go well, go and do it. It's a sprint. But
Right.
when that sprint becomes the marathon, you can't sustain that speed for too long. And we live in a marathon, like we live in a long race. So sure, you go ahead and speed and go down. That's why I find the seasons to be important. So I try not to say, hey, this is what you do in the winter, this is what you do in the summer. I explain it and I show the universal tendencies, but also we understand that everybody's different, everybody's life, everybody's biology, everybody's family's composition, everybody's business. So for somebody, the winter might be the busiest season, and
Sure.
that's fine. Just be aware that there is a natural tendency so that you can put some breaks throughout your day or be more aware that the weekends perhaps mean even more and say no to other things so that you can rest. But in general, there is value into understanding the seasons and create your own seasonal routines. Like, okay, I used to believe that this was random, but there is nothing random to it. I just happened to forget about it because it's what I experienced 12 months ago. But now that I start paying attention to this is a pattern. There is a trend. So when it comes down to trends and patterns of burnout, I think that part of our message is to make you aware that it's not random. Like there's an actual pattern to it.
Yeah, and that's where we get clues that clue us into what the real like root cause is. And a lot of that, this actually might be a great segue to subconscious mind, but a lot of that is things that we have been shown, especially as children, what was mirrored to us on how to process stress or situations, or even just being a people pleaser. If you struggle to say no to people,
Yeah.
there is like that's not going to change when you switch jobs or, the season. Like you still have to really get to that root cause too. And that's a lot of the work that I do because I didn't know that until I started. I'm like, I'm still running into the same situations and it's still stressing me out. Why is that? I need to change. And it comes with expectations. We think that maybe our parents, I just talked to someone the other day and she's like, my mom was like a workaholic. She was like president of every like company and volunteer thing she could do. And so that was mirrored to her as a child that you have to work and your worth equals your productivity. So it's undoing some of that too.
Yeah, in that subject, I have realized that seasonality also has a role to it. So you mentioned saying no. What I realize is that during certain times of the year, we should be saying yes and we should actually be asking for yes. And during other times of the year, we should be saying no. And let me just explain that. There are patterns of mood and energy through society. There are holiday packets within the year. And if you know yourself, you might know that certain seasons fill you up and give you a lot of energy. Look and see why. And then you might also realize that certain seasons bring a lot of stress and remove energy from you. Again, adrenal fatigue. So I'm just gonna say what I experience in the fall and winter. So I like to say the fall is really like Halloween till New Year's Eve. And the reason I say that is because I also believe there is a late summer. It's just different. But the biggest difference is the social vibe, the social energy, the social dynamic happening in the environment. As we progress into the fall, then this bloom of decorations and customs and events starts to happen, and I didn't realize of this until about 4 years ago. And that's why I also include social dynamics into my framework. Because my goal is that if you can start seeing those patterns before they happen, you can actually prepare for it and
Yep.
create a little bit of a plan for the next 3 months. That's why I believe that it's not just like a 6 month thing that you do summer and winter. It's more like if you do it every 3 months, it's most likely to include that social dynamic that is so unique. So I found myself on a celebration of Christmas within our family gathering. I found myself on the couch, tired, on
Yeah.
my phone, and I look around and I see my family, my wife's family, just having a great time playing cards, and I'm like, wow, I'm such a piece of blank, right? I'm like, wow, I'm so selfish. Like, why I don't enjoy being with people. Like, what's wrong with me? What are they gonna think? Like, that went through my mind. So the evening happened, and then I'm driving back home with my family, and then the light bulb came on, and I'm like, wait a minute. This is the fifth Christmas party that I attended over the last like week and a half.
Yeah.
And it is like 10 p.m., like I just ate a big plate. Like I'm tired from my work, from all these events. It's like Christmas is not just one event. It's like Christmas is, church Christmas, friends Christmas, her Christmas, my side of the family Christmas,
Right.
work Christmas, presents for the kids. And I find interesting that in Christmas it's like this roller coaster of emotions. And when you're sitting down and opening gifts in a circle in a family gathering, there is so much that is going through your head that you have no idea of. But if you look at your children, everything that is happening through them that they're expressing is also happening on the inside. They just don't hide it. But
Right.
their excitement, their anxiousness, their worriedness, if somebody didn't like something, if somebody liked something, you didn't buy a present for somebody, but somebody bought a present for you, somebody gave you something you didn't like. That is a roller coaster happening inside your head that we usually experience in like perhaps a week and like 30 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
And I didn't realize of that. And it's like Christmas is that. And now look back, it's like, oh, Thanksgiving. I mean, similar scenario, right?
Yep.
Friends givings, hers givings, my givings, like,
Yeah.
I don't
Yep.
know, like the community giving, like there's all, like go to a shelter, like there's all these events
Right.
and they all have like bad food and not bad food but like a lot of food things that is a special occasion. They literally get on the way of your healthy routine,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like you have a routine and you say I wake up at this time, I work out, and then all of a sudden there's a holiday, the gym is not open, all of a sudden you went to sleep late, you didn't wake up the next day, there is leftovers in your house, you're eating bad, you're sleeping bad, everything is just a mess. So my point here is that that social dynamic
Mhm.
affects everything else inside and on the outside. So sometimes burnout is because we say yes to too many things.
Right. Yeah. And definitely, yeah, the end of the year with that, Christmas, Hanukkah, New Year's, people you'll start to see it on social media where people will post things like memes and stuff like, oh, here we go, we're going to spend time with the family, and it's like, well, if we know that, right, we can prepare, like you said, for some of that. And sometimes that does involve saying no to stuff that is going to drain you, or it's your fifth, Christmas party that week and you just can't do it. It's it doesn't feel socially acceptable to us to do that too. And I think that's part of that issue as well.
Well, I think that we say yes out of lack of preparation.
Oh
Like
yeah.
if we and out of a lack of awareness. That's why I try to bring awareness to the subject because once you identify with it and you say, "Wait a minute, like yeah, like that makes sense." The next step for you is to understand that that's completely natural. Like it's not your fault. And when you say no, you're protecting yourself. Why would you want to go to a party you're going to be, in a bad mood, in a bad energy? It's not going to even be productive. So instead of going to 5 parties, why don't you perhaps do 3 this year?
Yeah.
And maybe you want to do the 5 and the 6 because that's what is good for you. There's no right or wrong here, but be aware of who you are and how those social dynamics affect you. And don't feel guilty of saying no. You can say, hey, this year we're gonna go here, but next year we're gonna go there. We just have so much going on, and with the kids, like there's always a reason that you can give somebody that if they love you, they will understand.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you're right. Planning for it, but being aware, because like if someone gives you an invite to a party, going back to that intuition piece, if your first thought is like it's that negative, like kind of tightness in your chest or stomach, okay, why am I feeling this way? Like get
Mhm.
curious. Is it
Yeah.
because I really like this person, but this is the fifth party that I'm going to have to go to that week, and a lot of times we don't even go there because in our mind it's not even an option. So we just say yes and we muscle through and like you said, we go to the party and we're miserable and we're drained. So definitely take an inventory of that and being aware is key.
Yeah, so there is the other side though. So I just described the high side, the peak, all the events of social gatherings happening in a 2 month span instead of like, spread throughout the year. Because if somebody's inviting you to that in February, you will be like, oh, of course,
Yeah,
like I love to go. Like I'm so excited that there is something in my calendar. Everybody's different, but usually as human beings, we tend to isolate a little bit more throughout the winter. And again, everybody's extremely different. There are biological reasons why this happen, but everybody's schedules is different. So I just want to acknowledge that, but I want to bring the point that there's this other side of burnout, which is like perhaps it's not an adrenal fatigue, but perhaps it's just like an adrenal, like they're completely shut down. Like we
hmm
are numb to the feeling. And we can be numb by just being so on, but we can also be numb by just like kind of forgetting what it feels like to be happy, perhaps. And it's like this other side of burnout that, again, seeing the seasonality and the patterns throughout the year, I noticed that it shows up in January, February, and March for the people living farther north. And it's because you just got done with that roller coaster and you're so high. And guess what's coming now?
right.
The way down. So again, everybody's different. I had talked to people that have a lot of birthdays in January, so like it's very exciting for them. But again, if you're a normal human being, you can perhaps struggle there. So what I do, I just want to put it out there, is our retreat. So we have a winter retreat that we do at the end of March. Yeah, it's usually middle end of March or even the end of February. It depends because I like to go to the Caribbean when there is wind because it feels so much better. Again,
hmm
knowing the seasons and the conditions, and it's windy, so we get to kite surf, and it's like the ideal time to go there. So
hmm
it also matches the ideal time to get away from an environment that became a little monotonous.
Yep,
So a lot of people enjoy the winter, but a lot of people don't. Let's just be honest. Like there is just a little colder. There is less light. Um, Things become a little more inconvenient. To get out on a
right.
walk. There's ice, or biology actually craves security, and it will kind of play tricks on you, the subconscious mind, to stay indoors. So I find that getaway, that vacation, being out of place in society, and I think it's just a lack of awareness. So I see a lot of people that say summer break, vacation. When I see summer break as there is so much to do
Yeah,
that if I put a vacation in my calendar, I'm gonna be so stressed out to get there and to come back because I'm gonna be behind, and I'm gonna be missing a lot of opportunities during that time in my city that there's all this stuff going on because the whole schedule gets put in 2 months
right.
of
Yeah.
events, and the list goes on and on. So having that trip in the winter, again, when it comes down to burnout, adrenal, imbalances, what is your perspective about that?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I usually January, but the last couple years in February, my family and I go to Aruba. And so same thing. What I love about it and why we kind of keep it at that time of year is that with that chaos in Christmas, sometimes you really get that like downfall of like, yay, holidays and all that. And then you're kind of like, okay, it's winter and it's cold and you're tired and you're like, what do I have to look forward to? That always works for me
Yes,
is looking
exactly.
forward. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And the matter of the fact is, like, I prepaid a bunch of stays already, so that I knew, like, I'm just going there because I feel that I found paradise, and it's like, let's just prepay for it so that I know I'm gonna be going back there year after year, and I want to do it a community event. I know the benefit. There's also a lot of biological benefits from, like, adenosine is it's kind of like a neurotransmitter, like is actually a receptor in our brain that over the winter it clears with the light. Let's put it that way. The light clears it, and the sleeping clears it. So it accumulates throughout the day, and when you sleep, it kind of clears out. But when we get in those winter extreme seasons, there is like an imbalance, and as the winter progresses, again, that monotony. But this happens even more dramatically if you don't have good habits of having something to look forward to do every week, if you're not
Right,
sleeping well, if you're not taking care. This can take a magnified
right.
condition. It can create a real serious condition, or it can just be a little bit of a feeling if you actually have stuff in place to prevent you from feeling the worst, from going there. So I find that by February and March, it's like, okay, I can kind of put up with January. Like, it's kind of like a little bit of
Right.
a job, and it's fine. But it gets to a point that even the most aligned soul, the more aligned being, just, it's like, okay, I kind of got enough. It's like I gotta get away.
Yeah, like you said, it's just breaking up that monotony of that too. Like you feel like you're just going through the motions. And so, yeah, that's a lot of times a nice break because then it's you're working into March and then you're like, all right, I can see spring is, on the
Yeah,
horizon.
exactly. Yeah, so it is strategic. It is a strategic burnout neutralizer break. It really brings you back to zero. That's why we call it the recharge, the winter break
Yep.
recharge. It's like there's other things that I think we're kind of running out of time, but I do want to touch on, because when it comes down to burnout, when it comes down to being on consistently, I find that there is a misalignment, and I'm very careful when I say this. I truly believe, though, I think just some people don't really understand that we are energetic beings, that we are electricity. Our brain is constantly going through electrical, connections, and distributing energy, and we're also water. Like, we're like 73% water. That's why we are so susceptible to the energy around us, whether it's from people or actual, like, electricity, or the energy of the environment and the season. So what I find interesting, and I want to touch on this because I want to get your perspective, is that when we were talking about some of those breaks, I like to bring in practices like grounding, like, perhaps infrared therapy, or exercising, walking, getting the sunlight, stretching, and yoga. And there's all these biohacks, and I say that quote unquote because that's what they are. They optimize your feeling, your performance, your energy level when you invest a small amount of time into that activity, like cold plunges or saunas. Like, it optimizes you. So I like to bring those biohacks in those breaks, and I like to bring them depending of the season. So I want to talk on that a little bit. What is your perspective about grounding, and any other biohack that you have found to be a really good way to neutralize that burnout?
Yeah, there is, I think, for like to your point with energy, that I want to touch on that real quick is we forget that. Like if anyone's ever walked into a room and there's other people and no one's saying anything, but you're like, ooh, it feels not really comfortable or warm here. It's like that's the energy that you're picking up on. And again, that's part of that intuitive aspect that kind of gets squashed as we get older. We're kind of brought up that we shouldn't really have that. And so to that point, a lot of I'm just kind of dabbling in this now, but a lot of the high achievers are solar plexus. It's one of our chakras, right? So we have seven chakras, and it's just that like wheel, like a ball of energy in certain aspects of our midline. And for high achievers, usually that solar plexus, that's where like confidence, grit, hustle comes from. Ours are all out of line. So what I experienced that I just started doing last couple of months was Reiki, getting Reiki sessions.
Yeah.
And that is kind of like a balancing of your energies, which at first, like I totally get the whole energy. That makes sense to me, but I'm like, I don't know if this is going to work. But man, just overall less anxious and relaxed. And I would highly recommend if no one has done at least one session, that is part of it. I love the grounding, I think is important. I think for anyone, we spend so much time inside, period, that if you can just get outside and even if it's 10, 15 minutes, that will make a huge difference. Anyone that does that, no one's ever said, well, that was a bad idea. Everyone's like, I need to do more of this. So
Yeah, exactly.
those are my favorite ones.
So I want to touch on that's what we do on the retreat. So the place we go is a Zen retreat.
Nice.
It's ecological, very low light contamination, like just scenic lighting. We're actually eating outside on this beautiful place every day. We have a yoga studio above, so that you can be out there, and they have a massage and a Reiki therapy room. And the whole idea is that we wanna bring our energy back to where it's supposed to be. And it doesn't mean to bring it up, to bring it down. It just means to being in harmony and in alignment. And I acknowledge that the winter has that tendency. And let me explain why. Again, the seasonality of things is that I have I'm very into going outside, and my families and my kids, we go barefoot, and in the morning when we can, we just step outside barefoot, drink our coffee, have a great time connecting to nature. And there's many other practices, but that one specifically kind of goes away. If you
Hmm.
notice, okay, we spend a lot of time indoors, but in the summer we spend a lot more time outdoors than in the winter.
Sure. Yeah.
In the winter, it's like we become indoor beings, perhaps.
Right.
And, it is a cultural thing because other cultures still spend more time outdoors. And even them that spend more time outdoors, there is a light absorption that happens not just through our eyes, but through our skin. They don't get any of that. That's why
Right.
the biohacking is so seasonal, in my opinion. That's what the red light therapy is actually good in the winter, not in the summer. Not that it's bad in the summer, but if you're going outside more often than not, you're absorbing that natural red light that comes from the sun, which is the best kind. But in the winter, even if you go outside or even if you go through your window, you don't get it because you're usually covered all the way. You might be wearing gloves, you have a jacket, you have a hat. Like this is what is open,
Right. Right.
your eyes. So that grounding practice becomes a great biohack in the winter compared than in the summer. Now you have to do it in a specific way because you can't just go outside when it's snow on the ground. I mean, you can again, you can do all this, and like you absolutely can. I'm not putting limits to it. I'm just trying to make it convenient. That's what I look into. How can we realign energy season by season in a convenient way? The same way that we also limit our movement in the wintertime. And because of that, I'm like, hey, I'm big into a walking treadmill desk in your
Yes.
desk, like, but in the winter, in the summer, forget about it. You're going to be going outside a lot, but it's like you need to increase those steps. You have to be a little more intentional. That is perhaps the most convenient way because you spend perhaps 5, 10 hours in your desk. If you do an hour a day, that kind of is convenient and it helps, right? So I want to also bring that to light because those biohacks are very trendy right now. And for high achievers, it becomes a to do, like
Yes.
another thing to do that puts pressure on a schedule. But if conveniently allocated and understood of the benefit and how it makes you feel on a season or another, now you can actually enjoy them. So that's why I
Yes.
like to call them breaks, but they're actually biohacks.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And usually what I tell my clients is if we're instituting one of these changes, I'm like, you have to get rid of one other task that you're doing because I guarantee there's something you can either delegate, delete, or just change it altogether. And so that's one way we kind of don't add to it, but we also start psychologically being like, it's safe to take stuff away too. So doing both of those
Oh
together.
boy, yeah, you go there. Well, for high achievers, it should be easy to understand. It's like the 80-20, and like like
Right,
do most with less. I like to. That's in my end. I like to say so that we can achieve more with less effort.
right,
It's like,
right, right. That's what we should all be focusing on.
yeah, the 80-20. So I want to end on a good note here, and we didn't really touch much on subconscious. I know you're big of it, so this can be an opportunity. But I truly believe that something that you said really resonated with me, and I think that it's probably the most impactful thing we have said. Which, by the way, this is a great episode, so we say a lot of good stuff. But when you're talking about self worth, and that being a leading cause to burnout, and that being a leading issue when it comes down to seasons, having self-worth on the ground things, it's like I think it's a really good place to land our episode. And from your perspective, what is the ideal self-worth that we should be really striving for, why it is important to have it in harmony and avoid being out of balance, avoid being so high and always going that when the low times show up, we look down on them instead of taking advantage of them, leveraging them, and optimizing our life.
Right. Yeah. The biggest thing is when self-worth, we have to like really look at it. I mean, I could talk an hour on that probably. I'll keep it short, but self-worth, like when I talk to clients, we think like self-esteem. Self-esteem is not the same thing. Self-esteem is how you see yourself based on external factors of like achievements and accolades. So if we didn't have all those things and you literally, maybe you sat on the couch all day and didn't do anything, you still have to have self-worth that you are, you know, um, you should be on this earth, right? Like you don't have to do something in order to prove your worth. And that's where we also, I think with the seasons and getting into that, we have to give ourselves, if you have good self-worth, you have to give yourself permission to make those changes. Because when our self-worth is on productivity, any change, especially if it's like doing a little bit less in the winter or doing, a little bit less in the summer, we get down on ourselves to say, oh, well, I'm such a crappy person. Like, I'm lazy. I should be doing this. If we have really good self-worth, you know that regardless of the external factors, you will be good and you will still be like, okay, maybe I made a mistake here, but I'm still an okay person. I'm still a worthy person. And that's where like even imposter syndrome comes from. But I think it's breaking that correlation between self-worth and productivity.
Wow. So I think it's very clear that you are not what you do. That is part of the issue. We are more than that. And I only see fitting asking and finishing the episode with, well, who you really are. That is a question for the audience. I have my own beliefs, and I believe that within that picture, we are all seasonal. That is not just what encompasses, but identify that who you are changes with the season, not because what you do, but because of the way you feel, because of the way that you behave, because of the way you think. Everything starts in the environment. It triggers a feeling as a neurochemical, and from there, the whole cascade goes. So you can choose who you are if you realize that you're seasonal. You can choose every season who you want to be, and it has nothing to do with what you do, but your perception. So, thank you so much, Amber. I appreciate it. This is a great episode, one of my favorites so far. And I want to let everybody know that all the links are below if you want to get in touch with Amber. The handles for all her social media and her programs are in the description of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and keep it seasonal.
Thank you.